I was 30 years old when my doorbell rang at 8:47 on a Tuesday evening. I wasn't expecting anyone. I remember looking at my phone first. No messages, no missed calls. I set down the glass of water I was holding, walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw a man I hadn't seen in 23 years. He was older, obviously. The hair that had been dark was mostly gray now. He was wearing a jacket I didn't recognize. He was standing very still, looking slightly down at the doormat. My first thought was not what you might expect. It wasn't anger, it wasn't shock. It was something much quieter than either of those. It was, so this is finally happening. I had imagined this moment before. Not obsessively, not regularly, but occasionally, in the way that certain unresolved things surface at random moments when you're least prepared for them. I'd never decided what I would do. Now I had approximately 4 seconds to figure it out. This is the story of what I decided. And why, 3 years later, I still believe it was right. Stay with me. I was 7 years old. It was a Saturday morning in March. I remember that it was cold, the kind of cold that made the windows fog at the edges. I was eating cereal at the kitchen table. My mother was making coffee. My father came downstairs with a suitcase. Not a packed-for-the-weekend suitcase. The large one. The one that only came out for long trips. I remember asking him where he was going. He said he had some things to take care of. He kissed the top of my head. He did not kiss my mother. He walked to the door, opened it, stepped outside. The door closed. I finished my cereal. I didn't understand yet. My mother stood at the kitchen counter with her coffee cup in both hands and didn't move for a long time. By Monday, I understood. He didn't come back that night, or the next night, or the night after that. By the end of the week, my mother had cried twice in ways she thought I hadn't seen. By the end of the month, his name had become a word we didn't say. I was 7 years old. I didn't know how to process the fact that a person could simply leave. That someone whose job it was to be there could decide one Saturday morning that they were done. I know how to process it now. It took about 20 years. But I know. My mother was extraordinary. I want to say that clearly and without qualification, because this story is partly about my father, but it is entirely about her. She worked 2 jobs for 4 years. She made sure I had what I needed. Not everything I wanted. There wasn't money for that, but everything I needed. She never said a negative word about my father in front of me. Not once, not ever. When I asked about him, and I did for years, she would say, "Your father made choices that were his to make. What matters is that you make better ones." That sentence became something like a compass for me. I grew up fast, the way children of single parents often do. Not in a tragic way. In a way that teaches you early that the world doesn't owe you anything, that reliability is a choice, and that the most important thing you can be is someone people can count on. By 14, I had a part-time job. By 16, I was contributing to the household. By 18, I had saved enough for my first semester of community college without asking anyone for help. I thought about my father occasionally, not with rage. Rage requires energy, and I didn't have energy to spare for someone who had chosen not to be present. What I felt was closer to a gap, a space where something should have been. Something I had never been given the chance to miss properly because I had been too busy surviving its absence. There were moments. The day I graduated high school and looked into the stands and saw only my mother's face in a sea of families. The first time I drove a car, taught by my uncle, not a father. The day a friend's dad showed up to his soccer game and stood on the sideline shouting his son's name. And I watched and felt something I couldn't name precisely, but that sat in my chest for the rest of the day. I never tracked him down. I never tried to find him. Not out of pride exactly, more out of a conviction, quiet but absolute, that I was not going to be the one who reached out first. Whatever happened between us, if it happened at all, was going to be on his initiative, not mine. That conviction held for 23 years. After community college, I transferred to a 4-year university, engineering, nights and weekends working to pay for it. I was not the most talented person in my program, but I was, and this I say, without false modesty, the most consistent. I showed up. Every day. No exceptions. I did the work. All of it. I met every deadline I was given. The people who hired me after graduation used almost exactly the same words my mother had used when she talked about what mattered. You do what you say you're going to do. I worked for 6 years at a mid-size engineering firm. Learned everything I could, saved aggressively. Lived below my means in a way that confused most of my colleagues. At 28, I left to start my own practice. The first year was genuinely terrifying. There were months when the math barely worked. Months when I questioned everything. But I had spent 21 years learning how to function without a safety net. Starting a business without one was not comfortable, but it was familiar. By my 3rd year in business, I had 8 employees. By year 4, revenue had crossed 7 figures. I don't say this to impress anyone. I say it because the number matters to what comes next. The business was worth approximately $2 million by the time I turned 30. I had bought a house the previous year. A real one, not large, but mine. I was sitting in that house on a Tuesday evening in October when the doorbell rang. 4 seconds. That's approximately how long it takes to look through a peephole, process what you're seeing, and decide what to do with it. I opened the door. He looked up when he heard it. Our eyes met for the first time in 23 years. He said, "Draw Marcus." Just my name. Nothing else at first. I said, "How did you find this address?" He said he had hired someone to find it. He said he had been driving past the house for 2 weeks before he got out of the car. I stood in the doorway and looked at him. He was 61 years old. He looked tired in a way that wasn't just tonight, the kind of tired that accumulates over years of choices. He asked if he could come in. I told him he could stand on the porch. He nodded. He didn't argue. That surprised me slightly. He said he knew he had no right to be here. He said he had thought about this conversation more times than he could count. He said he had started to drive here at least a dozen times over the past 5 years and turned around every time. I let him talk. Not because I owed him that, because I wanted to hear what 23 years had produced in the way of an explanation. What he told me over the next 40 minutes was both more and less than I had expected. He didn't make excuses. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't say my mother had driven him away. He didn't claim circumstances had forced his hand. He didn't wrap it in the language of mental health or self-discovery or any of the other frameworks people use to make abandonment sound like something else. What he said was, I was selfish, I was scared, and I was wrong. He said he had been 28 years old and had convinced himself, in the cowardly way that people convince themselves of things they want to believe, that leaving would be less damaging than staying unhappily. That a clean break was kinder than a slow dissolution. He said he had told himself I was young enough that I wouldn't remember, that I would be fine, that my mother would take care of everything. He said he had been wrong about all of it. He said he knew about my business. He said he wasn't here because of it. And then he said something I hadn't expected. I need you to know that I'm not here because you succeeded. I've been trying to come here since you were 19. The fact that you built something just meant I had less room to pretend you needed nothing from me. I stood there on my porch in the cold, and I looked at this man, and I tried to find something in his face that I recognized from my childhood. There was something. The set of his jaw, the way he held his hands when he was uncomfortable. I had his hands. I had never noticed that before. He said he wasn't asking for a relationship. He said he knew that wasn't something he had a right to ask for. He said he just needed, once, out loud, to my face, to say that what he had done was wrong. And then he stopped talking. And it was my turn. I had 4 seconds at the peephole and 40 minutes on the porch. And in all of that time, I had been sorting through something complicated, trying to locate the feeling that was most true. Not the feeling that would make the best story. Not the feeling that would hurt him most. Not the feeling that would make me look strongest. The one that was most true. Here is what I said. I don't hate you. I want you to know that clearly because I think you came here expecting it, and I don't want you to leave with something that isn't accurate. I don't hate you. What I have is a life that I built entirely without you in it. And that life is good. It is genuinely, solidly good. And I built it because of the absence, not in spite of it. My mother raised me to be reliable. The fact that you weren't taught me what that looked like in a way that nothing else could have. So in a way that I don't think you intended, you contributed to who I am. But I'm not going to invite you into my life. Not because I'm punishing you. Because there's nothing here that needs what you have to offer. The space where a father should have been I filled a long time ago. With other things. Better things. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you said what you said. I think you needed to say it, but this is where it ends for me. He stood on my porch for a moment. He nodded. He said, "You're a better man than I was at your age." I said, "I know." He walked to his car. I watched him drive away. I went inside, poured a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely, quietly, finished with something. The thing about absent people is that their absence is loud. It takes up space. It shapes decisions. It sits in the corner of rooms at graduations and soccer games and Tuesday evenings and reminds you of what isn't there. What I know now, what those 23 years eventually taught me, is that the absence of a person is not the same as the absence of what they should have given you. What my father should have given me, consistency, reliability, the knowledge that showing up matters, I found. I found it in my mother, in the uncle who taught me to drive, in the professor who told me I was capable of more than I thought, in the discipline of doing the work every day, even when there was no one watching. The things that should come from a father can come from other places. They are harder to find that way. They require more effort, but they can be found. And when you find them yourself, when you build them yourself, they belong to you completely. No one can take back what they gave you. No one can leave with what you built. My father left with a suitcase on a Saturday morning and took nothing from me that I couldn't replace. I just didn't know that when I was 7. If you grew up without someone who should have been there, if you've been waiting for a conversation that may never come, I want you to hear this. You don't need it to be okay. The okayness is already inside the life you built while you were waiting. Drop a comment if this hit something real. Subscribe for a new story every day. Just wait.